Okay, guys, so welcome. So this is our intro to Unreal, and this is going to be our intro to kind of just the general hub and kind of how things are going to work within the engine. Now, some things to talk about. Right now I'm in 412.22. When I was doing the content for most of this, it was in 411, okay? That's not going to really impact you guys because this is an intro class, so we're not going to go over all of the crazy awesome features that are inside of this engine. We just don't have the time to. The Unreal Engine developer blogs have a ton of information on there, so if you guys are interested in that stuff, you can go in and obviously learn it. So let's just go ahead and start. We're going to hit this launch icon here, and this is going to start to launch the engine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically walk you guys through what we're going to be doing, the basic templates, the basic UI, and all of that kind of stuff inside the engine, okay? So it's going to be a pretty straightforward, kind of walkthrough here. I'm just going to close down some of these programs here. The other thing, too, I do want to mention to you guys is and I want to apologize for this, but Camtasia has been a flaming pile of crap this entire time I've been using this thing. On average, I'm getting frame rate drops in the engine are about half to 3/4 of what they should be. It's pretty bad, but it's still not going to stop you guys from getting the information. So having said that, let's move right along. So on this Projects tab, we're going to jump over to New Projects. And for the sake of ease and the sake of dealing with stuff, we're going to click on First Person. And this is going to launch our first person project in our first person blueprint editor. We're going to hit Create Project. And you can see down here where there's a location for the project to be stored. Let's just call this Intro. Okay. We also can set our quality settings here. We can set a bunch of other things. We can say use the starter content or not use the starter content. We're going to leave everything as default for right now, okay? We're going to go ahead and hit Create Project. What that's going to do is it's going to build a bunch of directories, and I will show you where all of those directories live. Oops, looks like I overwrote some stuff. That is not good. That's okay. I'll deal with that later. Come on, don't open up everything, dear Lord. I'm just going to go and pull this up really quick. I'm on my other monitor right now, so you guys can't necessarily see what I'm doing. But here's all of my awesome naming conventions. But I just want to show you what one of these project directories look like. Inside of these project directories, in this case it's my project, we have our config files, we have our content files. This is where every time we make a new folder or something, it's going to be dropped into here. We have a bunch of additional config files, and we have our save files and our autoback files and whatnot. If you ever need to pull from an autoback file, okay, let's see if they have a backup file. This guy, that's an asset file. It's going to drop an autosave file in here. For you to actually access it, you need to copy it out of the save directory, come into content, and drop it into this content directory. Otherwise, it won't read it. You're going to have a really hard time getting access to it. So that's kind of an easy workaround for it. Okay. So let's talk about the UI. All of these windows are movable. Navigation in this 3D window is going to be used with the right click on your mouse. So you can look left and right, up and down, okay? Movement is WASD for those of you guys, WASD. Those of you guys who know shooters, this should be pretty easy. On the lower part here, by default, we're going to have our content branch, okay? And again, we can move these to wherever we want to. I'm going to try and keep my UI as simple as I can and not adjust things too much for you guys, just so you guys can follow along. On the left here, we have a bunch of different little access points for different tools, we have vertex painting, we have landscape tools, we have our foliage tools, we have our BSP creation tools, and our BSP alteration tools. We also have, if we come down through here, we have a recently placed node. So if I go in and drop an empty actor, if I come back under recently placed, we're going to see that empty actor there. I can just delete an asset by simply hitting delete. We have a number of basic elements, point lights, which is essentially just a light. Empty character node, which is just the capsule node. Basic primitives, which is what this entire space by default has been made with. If we come down under our lights tab, we have access to all of our lights. We can see here directional light in the scene. If we hit spacebar, we can bring up our different movement nodes. We have rotation, scale, and rotation, again, and you can see them up top here cycling, okay? And you can also see that when I do, depending on what node I have, it changes the transform gizmo to be world or local, okay? So world aligned or local aligned, okay? Pretty useful. Rotation, okay? Pretty useful. Cinematic stuff we're not going to be talking too much about. Visual effects, the things that we are going to be primarily dealing with are, of course, our exponential height fog. Fog is really useful. We can obviously adjust the start and end distance here, so let's just go ahead and increase that all the way up. Fog density, push that to about 1. Push that out to maybe 100. Or let's just push this all the way out to 1,000 so you guys can see. So again, pushes the fog way far out. Change the fog color. Okay, so forth and so on. And again, there's the actor right there, okay? There's an icon that's represented for every one of these little nodes that will drop into the scene, okay? And if I hit G at any point, I can get out of that and just kind of see what the game's going to look like. It's called game mode, okay? Delete that, the fog goes away. We also have a number of post-processing volumes right here. By default, the scene already has a post-processing volume, and the post-processing volume is what we use to control all of our kind of color corrections, our tints, color grading, all sorts of fun little things here. So this is a very powerful tool, and we go over a little bit of the settings and stuff in other lectures about what I use for this. We also have a number of different reflection capture probes. We have a sphere probe. And again, these all have various things. We have areas of influence, which will obviously control how far out the sphere will capture. Same with the box. And we have this guy, which is new. This is a planar reflection map. And this is a relatively new feature inside of Unreal, so it's expensive as well. And let's just go up here really quick to our project settings, edit, project settings. And let's go ahead, and it should be under rendering. Let's see here, clip. There we go. Now, some of these settings, whenever we go into alter them or add them, sometimes we need to restart the engine. So we're going to save this really quick. This is going to restart it. And again, sorry about the lag. Now, what's happening right now is this is going through and it's rebuilding a bunch of things. Those planar reflections require the world to basically render multiple times. Now, again, this isn't something that we're necessarily going to use, but I do want to show this. So I'm going to pause this and let this compile, and then once it's done, I'll reopen the engine. Okay, so again, here's the planar reflection. Now, again, this can get super spendy, so use with caution. Keep coming on down here. Obviously, geometry, this is basic BSP geometry at this point. Now, BSP geometry is a little different than what kind of just standard mesh geometry is. Now, basically, I grabbed those two verts and I held Control to select multiple ones. This is kind of an old school designer usage inside of Unreal. And I use this a little bit when we have to go in and when I have to go in and actually start modifying and building out some blackout geometry. I try to avoid using BSPs inside of Unreal as much as I can, though. I don't like the way they function. I don't think they're that great, to be honest with you. Source 2 has much better BSP controls. But they totally work as well. Bunch of different volumes. We are not going to be talking about this stuff too much inside of here, short of the post-processing volumes. And then, obviously, all classes is pretty self-explanatory. It's all classes. Over here, we have our world outliner. We can obviously add subfolders. We can group things. There we go. Just close all of that down. Make a new folder. Come here. Give me that. New folder. And I can drag and drop things onto it. Goes right into there. Oop. Sorry, it's already got assigned to a group. Move that into there. So drag and drop and control stuff. Okay, pretty self-explanatory and pretty simple to use. On the over here we have our details panel. So our details panel, depending on what we're selecting, will bring up different options. Most of the time it's going to bring up whether it's a static or movable mesh. Most of the time we're going to be having everything set to static. It also has our scale rotation. It allows us to see our actual mesh information. We can double click on this. If I double click on any of these meshes or this guy right here, this little magnifying glass, will allow me to find it within the content browser. Navigation within this window is the exact same as it is in the primary window, WASD. If I hold L, I can move a light around inside of this little viewer. This is our model viewer. It allows us to see different things. It allows us to view the collision. Let me just select that. It allows us to remove collision as well. It allows us to look at our UV sets. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see this. UV set 1. There's looking at this, we have our LOD states. We have our size. Obviously, that's just screen space relative. We have our triangle count, our vertex count, our actual UV channels right here, and we can cycle through the UV channels. Something to point out. It says UV channels 2. We're on UV channel 0, and then there's UV channel 1. There are 2 UV channels. Unreal is a zero-based counter, so basically 0 is considered an integer. 0 is actually considered 1. 1 is considered 2. 2 is considered 3. 3 is considered 4 because of the zero-based counting. Okay. Here we can also assign materials. We can obviously change a bunch of other little tiny settings in here, which we're not going to need to do too much of. And I'll go ahead and close that guy down. Some other fun little things to talk about. Since I moved this light around, we obviously have this preview icon. It's telling us that the lighting needs to be rebuilt. If I move these guys over, go through and select a bunch of different assets, and I'm just going to go over into our content here, starter content, materials, and just pull one of Epic's materials over. I can drag. I can drag. Oh, come on, dude. I can drag and assign multiple materials to multiple objects if I have multiple objects selected in this details panel, okay? They don't need to be the same assets. They can have different materials and all sorts of things, okay? And we can say, it says right here, 2 different materials. I can display the material types. And then if I want to replace it, it'll simplify it all the way back down, okay? Pretty cool, right? The other thing, too, to talk about, this cobblestone shader, pretty intense, but what basically this thing has on it is this has, where is it? It's lerping, it's got the switch. It is using, it looks like it's using, yeah, it's using an early version of, it looks like the bump offset mapping here. You can see it's sliding around, or the parallax occlusion mapping. Okay, so that's pretty cool as well. Now, this is a little bit advanced. We don't actually talk about this kind of stuff in this demo, so put it back to kind of hide some of that. But there's a lot of fun little things that we can do with all of that. Maybe we'll actually talk about the parallax occlusion mapping too, just to kind of make things fun for everyone. Onward and upwards, let's talk a little bit more about the other things that you're going to want to pay attention to. This drop-down arrow, you can view our FPS, our stats. We can view we can change our field of view. We can take screenshots out of here. Here are all of our different views and the corresponding hotkeys. We have our lit modes and our various optimization passes and stuff. So we can view, for example, we can view lighting complexity, right? Now, if you guys have questions on in-depth, here we go. Let me just pull this up. on in-depth things on Unreal, Unreal documentation is going to be your go-to source. It's going to be probably one of the best. It's really updated, and they do a really good job of keeping it up to date. So if we type in lights, for example, types of lights in Unreal, and it gives you all of the breakdown that's associated with all of the lights. Okay, really, really useful. Okay, you can do a lot with it. All right, moving right along. We have source control, which we're not going to deal with because we're working on my own little box, so I don't need to deal with that. We have our settings tab. Okay, our settings tab allows us to do a bunch of different things. It gives us access to world settings. Primarily, it also gives us control to global performance adjustments. Okay, so if I set this thing to Epic, obviously it's going to adjust all of the shader models, all the light models and stuff to be performant on higher end machines, and vice versa. Okay. Cinematics are for matinee stuff, which again we're probably not going to dive into for this. If we come over to our build and we hit our down arrow, we have all of our build settings. Okay, we have our lighting info, or our lighting quality, and our lighting quality. This is going to dictate the quality of the light map bakes, and obviously the higher these go, the longer they take, but the better they look. This will give us density information. Use error coloring will give us information on overlapping UVs and stuff, which is pretty useful. Our launch options will give us control over what devices these things get pushed out onto. By default, I'm running on a PC, so it's going to get sent out to a PC. We have different ways that it's going to be viewed, be able to be played. So if I could just go ahead and hit Alt-P on the keyboard, it's going to drop me in this window, okay? Okay, and this is all of the default stuff inside of Unreal, right? All of these are, they're what they are, okay? Pretty straightforward little plug-and-play kind of viewer. If we go ahead and I say, hey, let's play this in a new editor window, it's going to draw a new game window, which is kind of useful. And then we can obviously launch a separate executable as well, okay? Standalone game. That'll give you a better indication of the frame rate as well. There's a cost to running the engine, obviously, and playing the game at the same time. How do we get assets into this engine, okay? Now, the way I do it might be a little different for you guys. I prefer the drag and drop method, okay? All I will be doing 90% of the time is I will literally be taking stuff and grabbing and dropping it on in, okay? Really straightforward. That includes models, that includes textures, all of it, okay? And there's other ways to do that. We can obviously come in here and import into game and get a browser window, which will allow you to path to wherever you want as well. We have a listing of all the file formats that is supported. Holy hell, there is a lot, okay? What else? Now, let's go ahead and fire up the other thing that we're going to be using a lot. It's our material browser, okay? Now, there's a pretty lengthy section dedicated to material, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just want to talk about it briefly. Here's our material node. Here are our material properties. And obviously, these are all of the components which we can plug and play into our shader. Okay? Pretty straightforward. And we talk about these settings and stuff in a later demo. It's pretty cool. Is there a displacement node on this? My ADD is kicking in. No. Feature level switch. I don't even know what the hell that means. Looks like it's parallax. It looks like it's doing some parallax occlusion mapping. You can kind of see somewhere in here. It looks like it's pulling out some of the height information. It's doing something with it. Definitely utilizing some of that height information though. Cool. I'll have to look at that later. It's pretty neat. All right. So we don't talk too much about skybox stuff. We just don't really have the need or the time to. But if you're running in default here, let me just sky right here. We have we have a lot of control over the sun brightness. Where's the sun? Right there. Won't. This is essentially, think of this as like your mental ray skybox. We can control all sorts of fun little factors here. I'm just going to start playing with some of these values. Cloud color, come here. Where is this? There we go. Okay, so you can obviously, push this into a very interesting kind of space and get some really cool effects really fast. Also, this stuff will look up into the actual actor. There's a reference to the directional light source, so we can go in and actually tell this thing to correspond to the position as well, and it'll update accordingly, which is really nice. Okay, I'll come back and select that BP sky. What else do we want to talk about? That's probably enough for there. Foliage is going to be pretty straightforward to use. Foliage we're going to use that to scatter around a bunch of different actors or static meshes, such as foliage, some minor debris, and we show that in the making of section. And let's see, when we save, let's close this down, launch the editor. Open up this intro file. Come into here. And if I save different levels, I'll just save this as 2, so we can see it. Underneath here, we'll have access to the other additional maps, okay? Maps, this is essentially a level that you would go in and play, essentially a level that you would play. Project is kind of like the project folder, or you can think of this as a level as an individual zone, depending on what you set the game up to do. Now, again, this is not a gameplay demo. This is an art demo, so we're going to focus primarily on art stuff. The other thing that we can talk a little bit about here is in this search classes, if I type in a name of something, I can go in and grab whatever. Okay, so for example, I have a decal out here. This is a deferred decal. Very powerful, okay? And the deferred decals, there's a bunch of different little options and stuff that we can go ahead and play with, but the deferred decals are really, really nice. They basically allow us to go in and handle projections on surfaces using images, okay? So it's really, really nice, and essentially it just uses a box projection, and there's a material lookup to a decal setting. If you get into a position to where you need to change certain settings, like rendering features, for example, which if you guys are doing VR, you're going to need to do that. If we type in, say, decal, we can say, we can use debuffer decals. If we need to do stuff with VR, we type in VR. We can start to use stereo instancing. All of that stuff are project-based settings, and they are going to vary based off of what you do for your projects, okay? So let's go ahead really quick. I'm just going to do a quick build on with the low quality settings, and I'll stop the video and come back to you. Okay, so it built. Let's jump over here to the world settings. And let's look at light mass. Where are you? I'm going to type in light map. These are where your light maps are stored. Okay. This contains all of your lighting information, and again, we can adjust the light map size as well. That'll require a rebake. And there's obviously different settings for different projects, different engines, and all kinds of different things that you would need to maybe take into consideration. So let's talk about something here really quick. These guys are all in one folder, so I'm going to hit Shift-G to unselect by group, because by default it grouped everything. And I'm going to double-click on this guy. Oop, I don't need to double-click on it. Sorry, I was thinking I was in Hammer. Let's come under the detail settings here. Now, you have master settings that are applied to a single mesh, which will apply to every instance of that mesh in the scene. And then you have individual settings, which are controlled on the individual level. Okay, So if I type in, let's see here, where is it? Right here. Override light map resolution. By default, since this is the ground, this is set to a pretty high resolution. We still have some jagginess, and that could be a combination of maybe the ground's too big, or maybe there's not enough light map resolution overall. So let me just go ahead and rebuild this and show you guys what the difference is in the light map resolution. Hopefully we'll see something. But if you need to change your light map resolution per asset, this is where you do it. It's on the individual asset. Or you can do it globally on wherever the asset lives inside the static mesh browser. You can do that inside the actual mesh component itself. So I'll build that up really quick. So we're still using low res settings, but we do have sharper shadows, okay? Which is kind of cool. And again, we are paying for that, okay? We look at this guy. Let me just view that. Where is this? View options here. This is the atlas type. View. Yeah, obviously it's making bigger atlases where it needs to, primarily for this guy. This is the floor plane, and it looks like these are the light maps for that floor plane. Okay. Again, you don't need to necessarily change this too much. If you're running on PC, I wouldn't even recommend. I mean, you can change it, but just be careful with it. By default, try to keep most of your settings default as much as you can, and then alter it where you need to. Just to make sure everyone's really clear on decals, decals require a separate setting. Okay, you have a bunch of different basic projection settings. You have an opacity and a normal. You have access to all of the other render properties that you would have inside of a basic shader. You just need to select the correct one that you want, and they'll take an opacity map and use it as projection for different kinds of debris or whatever you're doing with it. You can use it for a whole host of different things. All right, so there's that. And that kind of is our basic intro, okay? So again, getting assets into the engine, drag and drop. Something to talk about really quickly, and we talk about it when we talk about the materials, light maps. Light maps require unique UVs, and typically they're stored in the secondary UV set, okay? And that stuff will get explained to you much more in depth a little later. But this is the start of our intro, so I'm going to keep it brief, and we'll just keep on moving forward. Thanks, guys.